Everyone's waiting for something exciting to happen. No. All right, it is time for our live stream. Put your phones on silent. We don't want to be interrupted. It's our time to talk about things, all things reefing. We do this every Saturday at 2 o'clock Central Time. Well, really 2:08. And I had some house guests here. Eric's first. Good job. I had some house guests here. I had to throw them out. I said, I got to do the stream. So they did. So today's was a rush setup job. I don't know how I like it, but we'll just make it work. The tank, as usual, looks like it's on fire behind me, which I don't like. Let's see if I can turn off one of the lights. And then we will get into our topic here. Let's see. That helps a little bit. Hello, Smoking Reefers. Hi, Sean. Hi, Andrea. Yeah, Rick was first. Nitrox is here, and Rick is here, and Derek and Linda. Boy, this was the week of tank leaks. I saw post after post, friend, foe, everyone was telling me their tank was leaking. So you guys should look at your silicone, make sure you're good for 2021, or have some kind of a plan of action. Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and start with that. There is a chance that one day your aquarium is going to leak. Do you have things in place, prepared, so you can do what you have to do when the tank is leaking, when your livestock is on the line? Because if you don't, you really should take some time today to kind of make yourself a list of what you would love to have, and then during the next couple of weeks, pick those things up and buy them. One of my friends had a 60-gallon cube full of anemones and clowns, and that tank started leaking. I think he said 20 minutes before he had to go to work, and he drives trucks at night. And so he told his job, I can't come in, and he spent the next 12 hours dealing with this tank leak. And he's pretty sure that it was leaking from the bottom, if I remember correctly. So he had to move all the anemones and clowns into a tank in his basement that was already in place over his sump. So in a way, he was kind of lucky because he just had this empty aquarium that he hadn't quite plumbed in yet. And he was able to use an extra Vector M1 that he had that he was not using. And he dropped that into the sump, and he ran some flexible tubing, and he pumped that water into the 40 breeder and got the flow going so he could put the livestock in there while he was dealing with cleaning up the mess upstairs where the 60-gallon had leaked. Because he caught the leak early on, he said he only felt like maybe 1 gallon was on the floor, which was really lucky. Had he had gone to work 20 minutes earlier, it would have been leaking all night, and it would have been, a lot of water on the floor and the sump run dry. So anyway, some things I would recommend you have on hand, and you can come up with your own dream list, but I would definitely say you need some kind of containers, which could be like 55-gallon barrels. Those are super handy, very durable, last forever, really. And they're food grade. So you can look for them at farmer supplies. They often have them. Here in Texas, if you're just driving down the road, like into the country, you'll see these places and there's just a mountain of blue barrels for sale, and they might be $5 to $15 a piece. And they're used, but like the ones I bought, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, I still have, they were for Dr. Pepper syrup. So food grade. And I washed them out, and I've still got the same barrels all these years later. And you would want pumps, you want some kind of tubing for draining a lot of water. Maybe you're used to your water change hose, and that would be good enough. Maybe you want something that's bigger. You're going to need a way to deal with the sand, the rock, some kind of flow in the barrel, at least initially. Air stones and air pumps and heaters. I mean, these are all the things that, some things you can transfer out of the tank into the new temporary vessel. You might want to own a Rubbermaid tank, like those big troughs, like a 100-gallon or a 50-gallon. They have some that some hobbyists use as a frag tank. They're shallow, but they're a big trough, and that would be great for holding livestock while you're dealing with the tank itself, and you can set it up, move things into it. I would, you definitely would. There's the other logical things. You already have these things. You have the test kits, but you may not have an ammonia test kit, which when you're moving a tank in a hurry, you want to be able to check ammonia and see that everything's well in the water and that it's not starting to cycle. And because that could end up killing things in the tank, which causes more cycle, and the ammonia levels just keep rising and rising and rising. You should definitely have a bottle of Prime on hand. I always recommend you have a brand new bottle in your inventory for every year. This is another good one to have on hand during that moment, because you can add it to the new trough to lock up ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, chlorine, chloramine. It's just, I don't even know what's in it, but it just saves the water from anything evil temporarily. Let's see. So it comes down to heat, flow, and light. So whatever temporary system you're setting up, if it's some kind of trough, you need a way to put the lights above it. So you need to have something ready to go or something you can rig or a way to hang them from above. So you'd need whatever that stuff is. But if you could have this emergency kit, so to speak, set aside in a box or in a corner or in the workshop, in the shed, in the backyard, wherever you do, just so you have something to turn to would be ideal. And trust me, as a guy who's had a few tanks leak in the past, I love that I have a 100-gallon trough out there and 3 of those blue barrels. That holds a lot of water. And it allowed me, and when I had to do the sand, I scooped that out and I just took it outside and dumped it on a tarp. And then I could just wash it out there. And then I had nice clean sand for when I was setting up again. Anyway, that's something I would highly recommend you to prepare for the worst, which is pretty much the worst thing that can happen is your tank starts leaking. And I only mentioned that one. There was another one that had a tank leak. There was another one that had a crack in the tank. And he's got a very unique tank, so he can't even get that one without a lot of trouble because it was a weird size. Imagine a tank that is 8 feet long, 25 inches wide, and I think he said 14 inches tall and is made with 1-inch acrylic. So that is not something he can just go pick up at Petco. He's going to have some acrylic fabricator make that, and they usually have other orders already in queue, which means it'll be a while till they can make him what he needs. So anyway, please, 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 please have some kind of a plan in place, because when this is happening and your hair is on fire, it's really hard to think straight. And if you have something lined up in advance, a checklist of your own that maybe you put with the goodies so you know what to do, that'd be great. And a lot of your backup equipment will come in really handy for that temporary setup. And then you can start cleaning up everything that you use on the main tank when you're breaking it down, and you can either move it onto the temporary tank or you can store it until you get the new tank replaced, the used tank replaced. All right, today's topic, I have to read it off here. Whenever I do this, it just goes off my screen instantly. So today's topic is the top 5 things you wish to accomplish with your reef in 2021. So I can't just tell you, here's your 5 things to do, because everyone has a different situation. But it would be really good for you to take time this weekend to think about what are 5 things you'd like to do with your aquarium, proactively thinking ahead rather than doing things impulsively or getting around to it. So if you could make a list of the 5 things you want to accomplish, your reefing hobby will be nicer for the rest of the year because you got it accomplished. So it could be something as simple as I want to really spend time with wire management and really clean up everything. And that could even include wiping down all the cables and maybe using Velcro straps or zip ties to tie them together, creating some kind of a panel board where you put all the components on the front and all the wires hide behind. Because unfortunately, our products all come with different lengths of cords, usually much too long, except when you really need it that way. And we don't have a way to like shrink it down to, oh, I just need a 6-inch cable here, but I need a 2-foot cable there, and I need a 7-foot cable here. It doesn't work out that way. So we always have wiring that we have to coil up and tuck away. And so if you have a way to put that all up, it would be ideal. Caitlin makes a suggestion. This should be the New Year's Reefolutions. That's pretty good. We definitely want to set up goals for this year so that way, like I said earlier, you want your hobby to be enjoyable and you don't want to be stressed. And I tell you guys each week something else went wrong with my tank. And this week did not let me down. Something else decided to break, and I couldn't understand why. I used the ATK, which is the top-off kit that comes from Neptune Systems. I've been running it for, I think, 3 years, maybe even 3.5 years. And I have the original one, which many people complained about the version 1, and they all said you have to upgrade to version 2. And I didn't, because mine worked. And the way it works, it has 2 optical sensors, and it has a float valve. So what was happening was the optical sensors are supposed to show either open or closed. Open means they're dry. Closed means they're submerged underwater. And for some reason, twice this week, the sump filled up with water too high. It went up about 2 inches higher than it should. The skimmer wanted to kind of bubble over because it was standing in more water than usual. And I was thinking, what is the deal? And I couldn't quite figure it out. So of course I called a friend and I said, this happened. What do you think? And he said, that float valve saved you. And I was like, you're right, it did. And that's the whole point of the ATK. The auto top-off kit from Neptune is designed to have a sensor, a backup sensor, and then a float if both sensors fail. And in my case, after all this time, both of my sensors had finally failed. And so the float stopped any more water from getting into the sump. And that's why it only rose 2 inches and didn't rise 8 inches, which is Perfect, that's what you would want. So it exactly did its job. And then because I sell Neptune products, I just went to the back room and I picked out 2 brand new optical sensors and I hooked them up and they immediately started working and now everything's repaired again. So it's nice to have backup gear. In my case, I'm a seller, so I always have backup gear, whether it's brand new or something I've saved from the past. And but when things fail, you have to have parts. And I always tell you guys to be prepared for what goes wrong. And so, even me with all my experience, things are going to break and I have to deal with it. I also had a metal halide bulb that again wouldn't turn on in the middle of the reef. I contacted Reef Bright and said, look, I don't know what's going on, but I keep buying ballast and I keep buying bulbs. And he says, no matter what, we'll get you taken care of. And in the meantime, I dug through an entire bin of used metal halide bulbs and found one more brand new one, my last brand new one, and I installed it, and that one is working. So fingers crossed for the time being until I get more ballasts in. I like to have extra parts on hand, as I've always told you. And so in my case, that happened. So that could be one of your goals, to acquire some extra pieces of gear that you don't have yet. It could be extra pumps, it could be extra lights, it could be extra heaters. These are things that you think you only need one of, or one kit, one collection of, like, I need 3 lights for my tank. You don't think to have a 4th one on hand, but it's really smart if you can. Matter of fact, this time of year, in the next couple of months, people are getting tax refunds, hopefully. And if you are, that would be a good time to maybe buy one more light to have on the shelf in case one of your lights fails. That way you can keep the tank happy and keep your livestock from wandering, especially if you, when I was talking with Tulio at Reef Bright, he says, we don't want your anemone walking. And that's exactly what I've told him in the past. My light's been out for 3 days. I'm worried the sea bay is going to start walking. And he says, yeah, we don't want that thing moving. And I thought that was nice that he remembered that. So we want to make sure we have backup gear. So maybe that would be one of your 5 goals. So I've mentioned cable management and I've mentioned backup gear. Another goal could be doing the woodwork on your aquarium or something along those lines. Maybe making the cabinetry look nicer. Maybe you want to repaint it another style. Just overall making things prettier and nicer. That could be another goal for this year. And then other goals could be, I've always wanted this certain livestock. I'm going to get it this year, which we talked about last week. What will be the next thing you'll buy for your tank? So maybe it's some kind of livestock you want. But you can set the goals of what you want, or it could even be, my goal is an upgrade. And I'm going from what I have now to something 12 times the size because I'm thinking really, really big. And you may have spousal approvals, like, yep, go for it. And you're like, okay. And you got to do that quickly when they say yes before they change their mind. Just a helpful hint. I came up with 4. Let's see what you guys come up with. I'll look in the chat and see if anyone else has made suggestions. But definitely start thinking ahead. I'm going to keep doing these streams. I'm going to keep reminding you to think ahead, because if you don't, you may regret it. I'm going to put this on the screen just in case. So this is in case Jack starts barking. It's preemptive technical difficulties. She's looking out the door. She's looking for the CAT. All right, I am going to take that back off the screen. And I got my finger on the mute button for yell. Sometimes it's hard to know if I can trust the dog or not. She can be quiet the whole time or then decide I'm going to start barking like crazy. I'm trying to see if you guys came up with any. So Jermaine says, my sump is leaking. See, it doesn't have to be the tank. It can be the sump as well. Oh, you know what? Goal number 5 could be installing a better sump. Nios Reef sells those. Let's see. All right. I'd like to answer your questions today. Make sure if you're asking a question, you do add Nios Reef. Oh, neat. King Tide Coral says, I utilized your tube addition method for my pistol shrimp and got him to go exactly where I wanted him to go. I appreciate you, Nios Reef. I'm glad that helped you. Yeah, I did that years ago with the skunk clownfish, and people ask me, how are they doing? I still have all 11. They're still doing their thing. and they're living in the right spot, which is great. Oh, good. I think she's going to be okay today.
The dog?
Yeah. Now's your chance. Close the door. No, I'm not being mean. Protecting eardrums from people that blow out their eardrums. Dave says, are any plans for an upgraded tank in the future? Also, if you do you recommend just selling most of the livestock? Sometimes transferring fish causes fish and coral losses due to stress. I don't have any plans for an upgrade, but we are planning to add another tank. So that is in the future, and it'll happen this year, because Caitlin wants her own tank for some of her own fish instead of mixing them in with mine. Even though she told me yesterday that everything new that we've gotten is now ours. And technically, she said hers, but I think she meant ours. And so we're doing that thing here. But she wants her own tank, so that's going to happen. Now, when you're upgrading, I actually don't want to destroy and sell off everything. I want to transfer what I own into something bigger. So I want to keep my livestock. I mean, I have Spock. That fish has been with me since 2004. She's right there. And she's up on the wall back there, pointing to it. And that fish has been through so many tanks over the years because of upgrades, tank leaks, temporary setups while the new tank is being ordered and being set up and cycled. So she's been through a bunch, but I would not want to lose that fish just because I'm getting a new tank. So, and when I transfer, I make sure everything matches between the two. So if I have a temporary setup, whether it's a trough or I have an actual aquarium setup, and I'm moving into another aquarium, I want to make sure the alkalinity and temperature and salinity are the same. Calcium, magnesium, nitrate, and that stuff doesn't matter as much. Usually all those numbers are lower in the new setup because the water's cleaner than in the existing system. So if I don't see that being a situation, but you have to move quickly and you have to be really focused. You can't be multitasking that day. You can't be helping with other things like cooking dinner or whatever it is that's going on in the house. Your singular focus will be getting the livestock from this tank into that tank as quickly as possible, safely, with minimal stress. And sometimes you're going to need help. You're going to have someone that has to assist you in possibly catching the livestock or carrying it across the room and bringing it to you maybe. So, keep that in mind too. But no, I don't think you have to worry about losing your livestock during an upgrade, even if the tank is going in the same spot where the old tank was. Because when you take down the old tank, you're draining everything into some kind of portable containers and moving them out of the way. Then you drag the old stand, sump, tank out of the way, put the new one in place. Everything is being kept alive with air stones and heaters. And then you set up the new tank, you get your plumbing done, and as soon as it's rock solid, you can start moving things back in. And keep in mind too, you might think, well, new plumbing and new glue and solvent, that's dangerous. You don't have to have the sump running initially. You can fill up the tank about 80% of the way up to the overflow, but not enough to pour down the drain. And just put the power heads on there, drop some heaters in there, and that will be the body of water for the next 12 or 24 hours while your PVC pipe is curing. And then the next morning, you can then open up the valves and let it start draining down into the sump and add more water and kind of fill up the system. So that is something that works really, really well, and there's no reason you couldn't do that. So you don't have to have every bit of it running. You don't have to have every reactor on the system. You just need to get the body of water and just run the tank at a lower water level temporarily till everything is established. And then that's it. I mean, you're adding more water, and as long as the temperature, alkalinity, and salinity are the same, you can add as much more water as you need. It'll just dilute the current water in the system. Alex says, can I turn off the skimmer for a couple of days to increase my phosphates? My PO4 is not detectable on the Salifert test kit. You can. That's one method. You can feed more. That's another method. You can feed a lot. You'll definitely see some phosphate. The phosphate levels do rise based on food, bioload, and then your filtration. If you're running filter socks or you're running filter floss or you have any kind of media that's removing phosphate, you can take that offline temporarily while you're trying to bring your numbers up slightly. It's a little tricky, but you definitely want to just stay on top of it. Now, I think I told you guys last week that my phosphate was really high, and I brought it down, and I checked it several days. I didn't check it yet today, but it was staying down super low where it belongs, which is great. But it's been another week. So the last time I checked it, I think was 3 days ago, and I was going to do it last night, but I realized I just fed the tank. Now is not the time to test phosphates because I just put a bunch of food in there. Rick says, my main display tank is turning 2 months old and I want to focus on growing larger Acropora colonies. Well, you definitely can do that. It just takes time and really, really stable water. So the more stable, the SPS that we always say for small polyp stony, someone a long time ago came up with the phrase, stability promotes success. So the more stable your water is, the better your Acropora is going to do. Now my reef lives in spite of me, and so even though I have weird wonky water from time to time, where it just seems to be, you would think everything would die, I typically don't have everything die. There may be a little bit of a loss here and a little bit there, but for the most part, my corals tolerate my insanity, and I'm really trying to be better about staying on top of stuff and try and get things really corrected, and really my biggest offender almost always is nitrate. Hello, Reef Keeper. Ariel says, what do you think about the new Hydros controller? Well, I saw it on display at MACNA 2 years ago when we had a MACNA. Oh, by the way, next month is the virtual MACNA. They're doing one later. They're doing a MACNA this August, September, but there's a virtual one happening in February. I think it's February 21st, and it's like $10. So if you haven't signed up yet, make sure you go to macna.org or yeah, I think that's right, macna.org, and go sign up right now to attend with us, because there'll be some speakers. It's a one-day thing, and you'll get some speakers. I'm sure there'll be some opportunities to win some raffle prizes, and we're just hanging out with Reef Keeper. So it's sort of like a live stream, but all day long, and I think you guys would love it. So the two of us are going, of course, and we recommend that you go as well. But back to your question about the Hydros controller, I saw it on display. I saw that the price of it was, it seemed pretty inexpensive. And I haven't done this myself. I just read a comment, and it caught my corner of my eye, and it basically said if you try to match the Hydros piece for piece to the Apex, that the difference is about $50 if you really got everything to line up. And I don't know how accurate that is. I haven't, like I said, I haven't done the math myself. But if it's about the same, then it's really it's something new to the market. People are still finding out the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you can, of course, with any kind of controller you buy, you can start off with an inexpensive one and then add on components to make it more and more expensive, but to be able to do more and more things. There are certain things that the Apex does that the Hydros doesn't. One of the things that I am aware of that it doesn't do is it does not measure, it doesn't monitor energy consumption. So you can actually set up code in the Apex to say, if pump 1 is lower than 34 watts, send me a notification. And that way you know if the pump has gone offline, or if it's not, or if it's obstructed and it's not running right, you can get a notification, which the Hydros can't do, at least at this time. So that's something to keep in mind. But I think a lot of people see like the price of just this piece is really cheap, and they think, oh, that's way bigger savings. But then when you try and compare it to all the probes you're going to use, and this and that and the other, and the energy bars and the sensors, and it just kind of adds up, and you're like, oh, I'm right back to the regular price. And that happens a lot in this hobby. So I don't know what to tell you other than it's new and it's neat, but I haven't used it myself. I only saw the hands-on demonstration they did at the time, and it definitely looked intriguing. There was a couple things I liked, like for example, one gizmo that they had that plugged in was a moisture rope that you could wrap completely around your sump, and if any part of that rope ever got wet, well, they had it set up to turn it off, like to turn off something, maybe a return pump. But if you're doing a water change and you splash a little bit on your rope, clearly you're going to see things shut off if you've got it set up that way. But I really liked that idea. Instead of having a single sensor in one spot or having to put up multiple sensors, this continuous rope was a really cool way to like make sure you hit 360 degrees around said object. So that was pretty neat. Let's see. Oh no! Dennis says, it's a sad day today. One of my yellow tangs is dying. It's laying on its side, gasping for air. All the other fish are okay. Can it be stressed from the earthquake? No, the earthquake you had was a while back, like a week ago. Your fish is going to suddenly be stressed out or stay stressed for a week. Matter of fact, they won't see the earthquake like you see it. You're seeing the whole tank rocking, but the contents of your tank probably was not moving nearly as much as what you saw in person as the world was shaking around you. But I am sorry to hear that about your yellow tang. I don't have any kind of fix for you on that one. You possibly could move it out of the tank and put it in its own body of water with an air stone to give it extra oxygen. Or you could gently hold it in your hand in front of a power head so more water is flowing across its gills. But I don't know why your yellow tank died. I had one die a couple months ago that I'd had for a long time, and I don't know why it died either. It just happened. Let's see. Oh, there's a cool goal that Luca said. So he made a list of the 5 things he would do. More stable parameters. Number 2, more strict quarantine. Wow. These are great suggestions. Number 3, make a cable cabinet. Number 4, make a battery backup. And number 5 is setting up a new tank. That's really nice. I like that. So yeah, having some kind of battery backup or generator or something definitely should be on your list of goals. That's smart. Variant says, you mentioned storing a used pump can lead to rusting. How can I store a used pump that I've used to mix salt water and done for water changes? Should I keep it submerged in RODI water? Well, number one, the pump itself can be cleaned in RO water, like you said. It doesn't have to be RODI. It can even be tap water, honestly. You can just rinse it really well. You could leave all the parts out to dry overnight, and then you could reassemble it, and you could grease the O-ring, and I wouldn't grease anything else, but just having that setting dry should be okay. I also look at the screws on pumps when you have to unscrew them, and if those screws are rusting, I like to replace them with stainless steel screws, which you would think will not rust, but there's different grades of stainless steel, and some will rust while others won't. Obviously the more expensive ones should hold it better. But another trick is, once you've got it screwed together, you could take a small paintbrush and you could actually brush silicone grease on the heads to create like a coating, and that way it won't rust while it's sitting on a shelf. And when you put it in the water, it doesn't cause any harm because it's food grade stuff that we use on O-rings anyway. So that would be one way. I know if you really want to, do an intense saving of it, you could shrink wrap it with some desiccant inside there to take any moisture out, and then you would literally cut open the plastic when it's time to use that pump again, but most of us don't go to that extreme. Linda says, any suggestions for a logging app? Absolutely. Reef Trace is the best app. And it's an app I've been recommending and promoting for the last couple of years on this channel. It's an app that lets you keep track of all your water parameters. You can see them graph over time. It never forgets your information because it's saved to the cloud. So even if you switch smartphone devices from iOS to Android, or you go from one phone to the next phone, as soon as you connect, it gets all your data. You just change the dates to find previous data, and it's all there. Plus, it has room for notes. It has room for, it has reminders. You can get texts to notify you of things that are going on, like this live stream is starting. There's a local fish store locator that I love in there, because no matter where I am, I can just open the app where I am, and it'll look for fish stores within a 45-mile radius of where I'm standing. And I can even move the marker while I'm, like let's say I'm going to go to Nashville. I can drag the marker to Nashville while I'm here in Fort Worth and see the stores and kind of plan my trip accordingly and say, I want to stop at the store on the way. So that's really useful. And then the Critter ID for my website is tied to the app and is going to be more robust this year with a lot more information. So these are all the reasons why I recommend that app. Jonathan says, any ideas for new fish in a 29-gallon? We had this question recently, and we threw out some small, tiny fish. Caitlin has a suggestion.
Clown gobies.
Clown goby is one. They come in green or they come in yellow. The green ones are more friendly. The yellow ones are a little bit more aggressive. Not badly, but like they'll pick at corals to put a spot to put their eggs. So keep that in mind. The what? The Randall gobies are really nice too. I'm not a huge fan of gobies in general because they move sand and they'll bury things, but these Randalls have been pretty good so far, and the clown gobies don't move any sand at all. They like to perch in corals. Other little tiny fish I like would be like the 8-line wrasse. I like the tiny yellow coarse wrasse, which will get bigger but works fine at 29 initially. I like, Royal Grama is another one I like. The Helfriki or the firefish are great, but they can jump, so you need to cover that tank. Dwarf Angels, like the coral beetle, would work. But they're going to need some space eventually. But, if you're just like, for now, I'm going to have this 29-gallon, but in a couple of years, I'm going to have a 150-gallon. It's great to get some of these fish now, and then they can go to a bigger home later, the bigger tank. But that's just a few. There's probably tons I didn't think of. And then there's little tiny things, like, I think I mentioned them as well, the...
Sexy shrimp.
No, I'm thinking about the fish goby pair. The
Yellow
Yasha goby with the pistol shrimp. They're very small, and then they have this other goby that's crazy that looks like a dragon with all these colors. Do you remember that one was called? The what? Spike fin goby. You should look that one up. They're really small. They'd even be better in a small tank where you can really appreciate them because things can get lost even in a 29 gallon.
I feel like any kind of goby is probably good. Small tanks.
Yeah, and then the neon goby. They're really short, really small. They're almost like cleaner fish. Those can go in there. I mean, you have a lot of choices of small, cute, adorable fish you can put in that tank. Just avoid things that are big or that can grow big, like a puffer, a lionfish, a tang, a grouper. You know, none of those. I've seen people put the Fu Manchu lionfish, which are very small and stay small. And those are really cute and adorable, but they could eat things in your tank. Anything that fits their mouth, they'll eat, just like any other lionfish I know. Regis says, Happy New Year. My alkalinity is dropping 0.1 daily. Wow, that's very accurate. Should I dose something? I cannot do weekly water change, 60-gallon mixed reef. Well, the water change has no bearing on this. If your alkalinity is dropping, you need to replenish it, and we dose alkalinity, whether you do it by hand or with a dosing pump. So you would mix up a solution, and on my website, I have an article that's a DIY, do-it-yourself soda ash recipe. And you can bake baking soda, and it tells you to use 2 cups of that baked baking soda in a gallon of water, and you have made alkaline solution, and then you can dose in what your tank needs, which will be some milliliters of that big solution. So you'll probably have a couple of months worth of solution from this 1.99 box of powder, which is a very inexpensive way to use as a buffer to maintain alkalinity, which of course maintains pH at the same time. But we're not chasing pH, we're just maintaining alkalinity. So whatever size your tank is, use the Reef chemistry calculator, put in the total gallons of your tank, put in what the alkalinity is now, tell it what the alkalinity is you want it to be, and then you select baked baking soda, parentheses soda ash, and hit calculate, and it'll tell you need to use whatever, 16 milliliters, and then you are going to use that amount every single day, forever. And as the corals grow in, you'll have to increase that number a little higher and a little bit higher to keep up with the demand in the tank. Tyler says, what size Nios skimmer for a heavy bioload in a 215-gallon tank? And he says 16 fish. I would say the Nios 220 would be overkill. The 160 would probably do the job well, but the 220 would be nice if you're planning to upgrade later, and they're not really that big, so you could do that.
I have a question. That's a lot of gallon per tank. Like, what are the 16 fish?
Tyler, since you're in here asking questions, let's hear what these 16 fish are. Aw. Rick says, so happy for what the things you get to do with, so happy for you that you get to do what you love. Congrats on living the dream, and thank you for all the knowledge and guidance. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for saying that. Smoking Reefer says, did you see the new Cade sump out of Australia? It looks fantastic. Also, did you see the new coral sanctuary has just been started on Barrier Reef? No, I haven't. I'd like to know more about that. If you have a link or something you could send me, I'd love to read it. And I have seen the Cade sumps. I believe Blue Life is bringing them into the US now. Rick says, my 4-year-old twin Havanese pups, Macy and Lexi, want to know Jack's reefing goals.
She does.
Actually, Jack is really good as a watchdog, and she checks the sump every single day. She literally goes up, looks in there, makes sure everything's moving, and then walks away. And if anything's amiss, I'm sure she'll let me know. Fortunately, she has not been storing her toys in there, which has been really good. But that's another thing in your goals for the year, maybe to animal/child-proof your tank from possible contaminants, because those things can happen. Yeah, she does. She says everything's in order. Nick says, I'm upgrading my tank and will be using new dry rock. I plan to cycle it in our container. You're not really cycling it, but you are getting it wet. How long should I cycle it, and can I ensure it will support the bioload of my livestock? All you're doing is making it wet. And you can prepare it by doing this, to kind of help leach out the phosphates that are in that naturally. It just comes out of that rock because it's made by man and it's loaded with phosphate. So having it in a barrel of salt water with good strong flow, you could add phosphate Rex, you could add a protein skimmer, you can actually try and get that stuff out of the system, changing the water every couple of weeks. You can add live rock enhance to add beneficial bacteria to the rock, but really it's not like you can just take this dry rock, put it in a barrel of salt water, and even if you left it in there for 6 months or 6 years, it's not going to suddenly be able to handle a bioload because it just doesn't have enough stuff in it. It needs to be densely populated with bacteria. So the live rock enhance would be a great way to kind of get things started, but then when you put it into the tank, you're still going to be gradually adding livestock. The livestock is going to pee and poop into the water. You're going to add fish food to the tank. That's going to allow the bacteria to grow or bloom and become more abundant, and it can handle more bioload. And then you add more fish, and you're feeding a little bit more heavily, and there's another boom of bacteria, and that's how we gradually increase the bioload in the tank. It's not a matter of how long you had it in salt water because it's dry rock. If you had live rock and not dry rock and you're doing this, the benefit of putting in salt water rather than just putting it in bleach and acid and baking in the sun is that you don't kill all the good stuff in there, and it does allow you to have a heavier bioload initially right out of the barrel. So that's something to know in case you didn't know that. Lynn says, what's a safe starfish for a softy tank? Thanks, your channel is awesome. Thank you very much. I like the serpent starfish. I do like the black brittle starfish. I don't recommend the green brittle starfish because the green one eats fish. So, I mean, they get really big and they're very active. And if you put food in the tank, they just start dancing across the tank, and they might even perch up so a fish goes underneath and they come down on it like an octopus. So I would avoid that. Other than that, I wouldn't get like a Linkia, even though everyone would recommend that because they're so beautiful, because they need a lot of food. So unless your tank is really established and really big with a lot of film algae in abundance, because that's really their diet, the Linkia probably won't last long in your system. That's why I like the brittle starfish and the serpent starfish. I have one serpent starfish that lives in this hole right here, and I have one that lives under this rockwork right here. I've had both of the starfish since 2002, and I never feed them directly. I just feed the tank, and they catch a piece of mysis that blew by. I've even tried to like put a krill near it, and the thing runs away. So it lives on its own terms, and it will eat what it wants. It's very picky that way. It's crazy. You'd think I could just hand it a krill, and it would say thank you. Or, you know, I know some of you guys are like, well, give it a whole silver side, but my starfish just don't seem to want that much food. They just want a little tiny bit, and they seem to do quite well. Like I said, I've had it 19 years. Wow, that's crazy. Alberto says, I have a 29-gallon standard tank, and I have 2 clownfish and a royal grama, and I want to add a couple more fish. Would that be possible? Yes, you could add a couple more fish in there. I have a sump with filter socks, a skimmer, refugium, 10% water change weekly. Yeah, you're doing everything right. You could add something else. You might like the gudgeon goby. That's a really pretty fish that likes to live in a hole. It's very shy, but it comes out and it's really blue. It's really, really pretty. And oh, what? They're going to make you come on camera if you keep this up. A long-nosed hawkfish, you can get a very small one that fits in a 29-gallon, and it helps with bristleworm population control. So that's really useful as a working fish, plus they perch. You can get a hawkfish, but don't get the arc eye hawkfish, because the arc eye, which has an arc right over its eye, like a horseshoe, that fish will eat your hermit crabs. It'll be aggressive toward other fish. It'll just be mean. So it's kind of a bully. So don't get the arc eye unless you have a really big tank and you don't care what happens.
The eyebrow blenny.
Is that what they call that?
The eyebrow blenny? No, I'm talking about something.
Have you guys heard of an eyebrow blenny? She's making stuff up again. Right? Since you're not on a microphone, I can just say that you're making stuff up.
Eyebrow blenny.
At some point, I'm going to put a camera on her, and I'll just click and add her to the stream whether she likes it or not. Okay, I want to talk about this for a second. Ellery Wong says, a friend of mine's 265-gallon just got a leak. He's already emptied it and is trying to seal it. So, sealing a used glass tank unless you're going to cut it apart to have a pile of glass, completely clean, and then, I mean, literally you use the proper cleaner like ethanol or something like that to wipe down the glass, and then silicone it together into a cube again or a box. That is rebuilding a tank from scratch, and that's the only way I trust it. If you're just rubbing silicone on the inside seam where a tank was leaking, you're just creating a very thin barrier between all the water and the area that was weak. And so whenever people say I'm resealing a tank, I'm like, I hope you mean rebuilding. And I know a couple of people that rebuild. Matter of fact, I had one person send me a bunch of pictures of what they did. They cut it all apart, they glued it all together, and I'd meant to do a blog about it just to get that on record so that people could see when it comes to resealing, this is really the best way. Because to just apply a silicone with a caulk gun and then spread it with your finger is just that fillet. That's all you're putting. But the area where the glass is touching the glass, that part has already given way. It's already leaked. Now, I'll tell you this was a crazy one. Sanjay Yoshi has a big 500-gallon reef in his home, and it was leaking down in the bottom corner, the worst spot possible. And one of the solutions that was offered to him, which he has done a couple of times, so it's not a long-term fix, is he went into the tank with a tube of silicone, with a tube of super glue gel, like we used to mount coral frags, and he squirted it into the corner so the glue would go through the leak and glue it shut. And that was a fix. But then after a while it let loose and he had to do it again. So I don't recommend that very often. Hey, the eyebrow barnacle plenty exists here.
It does.
So if you guys are looking, here is this weird fish that she recommends. If any of you guys want a ugly brown fish, this is the one. I'm teasing. I'm all about the colorful fish, people. Widow Bass says, when buying used equipment, is there any concern bringing pests in from someone else's tank? For example, a Vortec pump. They're so expensive and used might be the way to go. No, there's no worry about that at all. Matter of fact, you're going to take the wet part that's underwater, you're going to clean it in vinegar solution, and you're going to scrub it and disassemble it, and there'll be nothing in it. And you'll put it back together, and you'll put it in your tank and turn it on, and that's it. So no, there's no fear of that. Usually pests come from things that are wet. So like if someone gave you a used pump, you would definitely not just take their dirty pump and shove it in your tank because that's gross. You're going to want to clean it up and get it down to the original plastic, and that's what we do. So I would highly recommend you do that with anything you buy when it comes to used setup. But you know what? The whole fear of pests thing is so overblown. Yes, it sucks to have a little problem in your tank, a nuisance, but it's not enough to just go to these extremes that I feel people are going to avoid all things at all costs. Because everything has a purpose in the ocean. And all these things are like, oh, I don't want that. They actually do something beneficial, or they wouldn't exist. They would literally be, through evolution, they'd just be destroyed. They wouldn't exist anymore. So I wouldn't be so fearful of stuff like that. I would just recommend that you just do your best, be vigilant, look, inspect, and if you see something, deal with it early on. And if something gets out of hand, you just handle it. You just deal with it. But I would not sit there and say, oh, I don't want to buy used setup because I might end up getting an aptasia, or I might get a bristleworm, or I might get an orange ball anemone, which, by the way, are really cool. Or, any of these things. And sometimes you get something really cool. Like, for example, and this is slightly unrelated, but yeah, Metro Cat got something recently. I think it was Live Rock. And she ended up getting an octopus. Coolest hitchhiker ever. And very rarely people get that kind of hitchhiker. And she named it Inky. It's super cute. And it's really small. And all her pictures she posts on Instagram are usually really dim light and hard to see, or using the infrared camera, because you're not supposed to use a bright light on an octopus. So her images are a little hard, to make out versus something you see on National Geographic. But it's an adorable little tiny guy that has been with her, and they only live for a while. You get them for like a year, maybe a year and a half if you're lucky, but typically a 1 year duration. So it's really nice. But you need to know a lot about what you're doing when it comes to it. But this is a hitchhiker. She didn't plan for it. Someone even offered her a tank, if I remember correctly, and then someone, I think, ended up making her a cover that matched her tank, just to make sure it wouldn't that it wouldn't escape and be lost. Jeff Roz says, for a beginner, do you recommend setting up a small frag tank prior to the tank setup, or just go all in with the tank setup? I would definitely recommend setting up the tank. The frag tank thing was created, or what do you want to say, engineered when people were selling frags from their main tank. So they're growing so much coral, they had to trim off corals and put them in a separate tank just to sell, just to propagate and get them out there. But no, I would not set up a frag tank first. If you are thinking, well, I want to learn because I'm new, pick a tank you like, a size that you can live with, and go with that. My first tank was a 29-gallon, and I ran it for 7 years. So you don't have to go big. Bigger tanks are easier to maintain. They have a bigger water volume. There's a lot more cushion for error. It takes a lot more time to overheat it or to get it too cold. It's a lot longer for the water to get too polluted because there's so much water. Or with a very small tank, like some people say, I have a 7-gallon Pico. I'm like, wow. Or I have a 3-gallon, or I do it in a vase. You know, those tanks are much more quick to go downhill if you're not staying on top of it. So the people with these tiny systems often do weekly water changes just to make sure their water stays really, really good. And they have to be really vigilant again to make sure temperature and salinity are the two things that change quickly on a very small tank. But my friend AJ, who's just here today, he really wanted this really nice drop-off tank. It was huge. It was I can't remember how many gallons, but this thing was gonna be like 4 or 6 feet long. It was a big object. And he said, man, I want that tank. I want that tank. I can't do it yet. It's not the right time. And I told him, just go get yourself a small all-in-one. And I don't know, a month later, he bought some small tank and he set it up and he got some livestock for me, got some stuff from the store. And he was so happy to have a little tank in his apartment when he came home from work. So I would recommend you get something that you can afford, that you can appreciate now, and you can learn with it. But having a frag tank isn't a learning tool. That's just fighting to keep corals alive. Instead, just set up a small tank. I don't recommend frag racks in it. I never do. I always tell you don't put frag racks in your display tank. Your display tank should be a beautiful reef that is pretty to the eye and doesn't have these weird objects hanging off the glass. So I would recommend you just focus on growing a nice little reef, whether it's hard corals or soft corals, with a few fish you really like, and just make it enjoyable. Freshwater Corals, what an interesting name, says his 5 goals for the year are upgrade the lighting to metal halide and T5s. I love that. Number 2, get rid of the last few Optasia. Good. Number 3, do more water changes. Number 4, start dosing amino acids. And number 5, buy more coral. Yeah, I agree with you. Back to the point about setting up a tank that's a little too big when you're brand new in the hobby. You know, when people said, what size tank should I get? I loved saying back in the day, get a 120 gallon, because that's a 4-foot tank by 2 feet by 2 feet. So you had a lot of room to work and play. And you could have minimal aquascape in there and have a lot of open sand where it just feels like the beach going into the ocean, which is kind of nice. But it's kind of large and it might feel overwhelming. And if you end up with too large a tank, you could be overwhelmed or find that the costs are so expensive, that it's just not, the hobby's not enjoyable for you. So you have to find what fits your home, your budget, and your desire. But like I said, you can start with something small, but you can go with something larger. You just have to find something that fits your personality and gives you the ideal situation that matches your desires and your feelings. Okay? Sean says, what checklist of items would cause high phosphates? I've ruled out the source water and the salt mix. Besides food, what else could cause phosphates to rise? It can come right out of the rock. It could be that the rock is old, the live rock is old, or it could be dry rock is just emitting phosphate. It's very normal. And that's one of the reasons why people like to take their brand new dry rock and get into some salt water for weeks and change the water regularly, or use something, like I said, Phosphate RX, to remove it from the system and knock it back down to nothing. And because it's leaching out. And the higher the phosphate was in said rock, the worse it'll be. For example, Randy Holmes Farley many years ago said, if your phosphates ever reach 3.0, then you will continue to have it leaching out over and over. 3.0, that's really high. And believe it or not, I've hit that a couple times. But once it's that high, it's in your rock, it's in your sand, and even as you remove it, it comes back out of the rock and sand, and your levels are high, and you remove it, and it comes out of the rock and the sand, and it's high, and you keep removing till you finally get out of the system. So that is usually the source. Your bioload, especially with a bunch of tangs, big fish that are like whales in your tank, they are creating a lot of phosphate. If you're using nori, it's phosphate pressed into a sheet, and you clip it to the glass and you give it to your tank to eat, and it poops it all out. Phosphate, just part of the reef. But I don't know. Look, I've never feared phosphate. Nitrate is my worst plight. I've had phosphate on my tank, 0.75, on a regular basis. Richard Ross has a really pretty reef tank that he has all these LPS corals, tons of dendros and sun corals, and his phosphates are easily measuring 1.0. And yet he doesn't have a tank full of algae. It's not a nightmare. My tank, like I said, I've had it at 0.75, I've had it at 0.5, I've had it at 0.1. Currently, as of last week, it goes 0.05. And I just use Phosphate RX to knock it down where it belongs from time to time. And it's so easy to do, but some people prefer to use GFO, and they are using that to bind the phosphate to that media, and then they throw that media away and put new GFO in. And while that works, it's kind of expensive because I'm trying to do this because I notice that light is flickering over my shoulder. They do this because they feel it's more consistent, where my method is sporadic. I'm using Phosphate RX every 4 to 8 weeks. Really about every 8 weeks. I get motivated to use it. But mine is a real simple system where I put in X amount of drops. It takes me about a minute to do it, and then I'm done. I don't even think about it. And the next day, the phosphates are gone. That's why I'm very happy with it. Paul says, what are your thoughts on floss versus filter socks? Floss is really inexpensive, and it's easy to buy a huge roll of it, and you can lay it in trays, catch the sediment, peel it up, and throw it away.
Those like the sponge filters?
Yeah. And then socks, you're going to hang them in the sump, and you've got to change them every 3 days for the rest of your life, for the life of that tank. And you've got to remove them as they get disgusting. And every minute that the water's pouring into them, it can leach out nitrate and phosphate into the water. Because while it's trapping bubbles and making your tank look nice, it's filling up with waste, and the water's flowing through the waste into the rest of your system for the protein skimmer, for the refugium, for whatever you've got afterwards to try and absorb. But if you'll remove those regularly, and that's why I tell people, if you have a filter sock on your sump, I recommend you buy 10 so you have enough for the month. And every 3 days you change it, and then after a month you wash all the filter socks, and then you have a new batch of socks, 10 new socks for the new month, and you just do this. You should never have a filter sock dumping over. If it's so full that it's just dumping over, it's literally doing nothing. It's just catching waste. And when I say catching waste, it's catching everything. It's catching fish poo, it's catching detritus, it's catching particulates, and it's catching fish food that went down the drain uneaten because the fish never got a chance to get it before it went right over the overflow box. And it's just rotting in the sock, which is going to add to your problems and add to algae problems in your tank. So that's why people are wanting like the Clarisea or the Clear, which are these fleece roller systems where the water flows through the fleece and the fleece automatically advances a couple inches at a time to remove the detritus from the system. And you could have a roll last you a month or two if you have to change it, rather than have to change socks every 3 days. And if you have 2 socks on your sump, then you need 20 socks for the month. Myself, on my tank right now, I do have a filter sock in there for when I ran Phosphate RX, because it's a 5 micron sock. But normally I don't run any kind of sock whatsoever. And I took my Clarisea off a couple months ago. Just it's sitting in the back room. I need a new roll, and I haven't done it. So my tank, literally, the only thing filtering it is the protein skimmer. And then I have the natural biological filtration of the refugium. And I have the turf scrubber, which is growing algae on a sheet. And I've been growing a lot of ulva, which is kind of weird, but it's growing in my tank. It's the leafy stuff. It's kind of neat. It's what you saw on this pump over here yesterday. Derby City Reefer says, if you test PO4 after feeding, can that be an indication of the amount needed to keep above 0? No, but if you test right after you dump food in the tank, you definitely get a reading on your test kit. That's for sure. A lot of people like to rinse their food or drain their food. I don't. I mix the food I'm melting, like the frozen foods. I melt it in a cup of tank water, and as soon as it's thawed, I pour it into the tank. So there is solid food, and then there's particulates, and then there's liquid food when you think about it. And yes, phosphates going in every night when I put in some frozen food in the tank. Entity, I think I said that right, says, besides snails, what inverts are good for algae control? The mighty hermit crab is a very good one to have. Because hermit crabs are, they have the little claws, and they will pinch off the algae, and they'll consume it, which is great. Emerald crabs will help with bubble algae. So that's another good one to have in the crew. If you go to millersreef.com/CUC for a clean up crew, there's a whole list of items I recommend, including tuxedo urchin, sand conchs, trocha snails, which are better than astrea snails because they can flip themselves over again, where an astrea gets stuck and you have to rescue it. Yeah. Let's see. But yeah, I remember it was a couple of years ago, this tank behind me here, the Anemone Cube, had some green nuisance algae growing on the rock, and there was a bunch of snails in there. And I went up to the fish store, I went to Frank's, and I said, hey, I've got snails in there. They're not old ones, I mean, they're hungry snails, but I've got this algae problem. And he says, how many hermits are in there? And I was like, I can't think of any. And he said, well, there you go. You need hermit crabs. And so I bought a bunch from them on the spot and put them in, and guess what? They were picking away at it. I was like, oh, how did I forget that? So sometimes we just kind of, you know, we get immersed in our project and we kind of forget things. So it's good to ask questions from the fish store, from other reef keepers, kind of bounce ideas off each other and kind of, you know, like you just now, you asked a question, I answered it, and hopefully it's going to help you. And that way you can put in some critters in there and kind of keep your tank nice and clean. And you know what? You might say, oh, I hate blue legs, they're too aggressive. I always recommend the red-legged hermits because they're not as aggressive. So, and if you get blue legs, at least back in the day, when you'd order them, you get these microscopic ones, and those things have no ability to hurt anything in their tank because they're so darn small. So you could get a bunch of these adorable little blue legs, and they just go everywhere like rice in your tank, and they're picking away. But they will grow in time, and when they get bigger, they could become a little bit more problematic. Smoking Reefer says, I want to get an Achilles tang this year in my 300. I have a large refugium, but I have 5 tangs. I have the regal, the yellow, the coal, the sailfin, and the purple. I need this fish. What's the safest way? Leave him in the sump for a while? The Achilles is going to be really aggressive, and I don't think it's going to get along with the fish you have. But I think you should get another 300-gallon tank and put it in it. That's a tricky one. I mean, we'd like to have an Achilles in this tank, and we're kind of debating whether it's a possibility. But you've got the general rule is to make sure you don't put 2 tanks of the same shape in the tank together. And we were just arguing about the shape of the Achilles versus the tangs in my tank, you know, comparing them side by side to see if we can avoid the aggression.
You said the Achilles was shaped more like the yellow, and I said no.
Yeah.
More like the asshole.
Let's see. Ryan says, I just got my new Hydra 32 HDs. I need help setting up the color channels for my corals. My tank is 4 foot by 2 by 2. It's all Acropora. Is there any tips that could be helpful? You're going to need to go like to a group that has people using that light. They can give you direct information about how to set it up. I guarantee you there's going to be some YouTube videos literally showing you how to set up the channels to get the right color combination you like, and that will be the most beneficial. I'm going to tell you, almost everyone's going to point you to going into the blue and purples, and I'm going to tell you to go into the whites. So you're going to need to find that happy medium. The beauty of these electronic or these LED-based fixtures like the Hydras is that you can change the color of the lighting throughout the day. You can change intensity throughout the day. So you can actually have it start off in the blues and then move into the whites for the peak of the day, and then move back into the blues for the evening to enjoy all the nice colors. But during the daytime, you're throwing the white in the tank, and you can set the intensity so you don't cook your corals. Now, the Hydra 32 is not crazy intense like the 64s. So I think that you won't have too much risk with using quite a bit of white, but you want to be cautious not to burn your Acropora with too much intensity. If you own a par meter, or if you own a lux meter, or if you own a per meter, some people have the Senai. They have different ways of determining the par in the tank. They can then determine how much light is being cast, and you can adjust your intensity and make sure you're not putting too much on the tank to where you burn the tips of your corals. So keep that one in mind. These light fixtures do have other features built in, such as lining up with the lunar cycle, like Caitlin was just saying, to where you could kind of match it up with what's happening with the moon outside, which is kind of fun. But we really care about the daylight because corals grow naturally in the ocean and under the sun. And people will debate this because they like to debate. But they say, well, when you get down there, it's all blue. It's like, no, it really isn't. I'm a diver. And there are areas that are more dim, but they have parts of the day where they're getting basked in white light, especially when the sun is directly overhead coming straight down. And we're talking about corals that are coming from 30 to 60 feet. We're not dealing with corals that are 300 feet deep. No one's diving down that deep to get us corals. That's very rare. A lot of stuff is just mere inches under the surface of the water. And some of the corals, the tide goes out and the acros are exposed to air, and it just, the water's all around it, and the coral's sitting in the sun. No blue light. Technically there's blue because white is a combination of all the colors, but still, I would recommend some daylight and then some blue light. But you can definitely have some people to help you pick those ideal schedules. And you know what? Some of these light fixtures have a default you can pick. You can try this one, or this one, and see if you like any of them, and then make minor adjustments to find it. And I do want to tell you that a lot of times the light fixtures are programmed to do like a 12-hour day or even longer, and I don't recommend that. I suggest you bring it down to 9 hours a day. Just move it to where it starts later in the day so it lasts into your evening so you can enjoy it till late at night. So maybe start at 1 o'clock and turn off at 11 o'clock or something, rather than starting at 8 a.m. and going till midnight. That's crazy. Don't do that. Oh, good. Louise said, what's the name of the app? It's Reef Trace. You can Google Reef Trace Live. It's for iOS and for Android. Oh, I see some people replied to you in the chat. Courtney says, is it possible to grow SPS with Ocean Revive T247 lights? Probably.
Lights?
No, I think that's an LED fixture. The spiritual counselor says, one of the 5 things I want to accomplish with my tank this year is to stop spending so much dang money on it. That's a good answer.
Godspeed.
Spencer says, just watched your interview with Humblefish, which was amazing. Do you think starting a business similar to his would be viable, or are there already enough people in the hobby doing this? Well, if you're talking about fish disease, there's not a lot of people doing it. So when we have just a few people out there with information, I mean, unless you really know this topic well, I'm going to keep pointing people to that, to that person. I've been pointing people to Humblefish for years, even without even talking to him. I just knew he was the person to go to. Just like chemistry, I sent him to Randy Holmes Farley. There's just certain people that they are the expert, and I send them there. And people come to me for the answers I have as well through learning things the hard way or through my going to MACNA and learning from the speakers on the podium. And through that information I've gained, I've been able to share it with you. But there are certain people that are really strong in certain areas, and I would always point them to that. Now, is it a viable business? I mean, even my own business, it's I got kind of lucky. And we'll do a story here. There's a lot of people that see this hobby as a way to make money. They get really excited, and they say, I'm going to sell this. And they basically come in really fast and hard. They promote their business really hard, and you can just feel they're there to flip a buck. They're trying to make money. And in the process of doing that, they really don't care about the hobby. They care about making money off of you. And that's just me boiling it down to the pure core value. When I started my website way back in, I think 2002 is when Milo's Reef came to life, I was writing articles about the things I learned so that I could finally point people to answers. And it wasn't me being mean. I mean, I'm not being mean here. I'm just being realistic. I've seen a lot go on in the 2 decades I've been in this hobby. And I would write these articles, and then when somebody would say, well, how do I lower my nitrate? I'd send them to the nitrate article. If they said, how do I set up a sump? I sent them to my sump article. If they said, how do I measure PAR? I sent them to my PAR article about how to measure light and what meter you needed. And I kept writing articles, how to fight flatworms, how to identify Acropora, Montipore eating nudibranchs. I started Critter ID, so I could literally show, when people say, well, what is this? I would put the link to that item in Critter ID, and they could see the picture and the paragraph about it, whether it was reef safe or not. And they'd get their answer with a link. And my website was all about that. And I wasn't selling it at the beginning. And then there was a company that sold me my first RODI system. And I really liked it. And I was so impressed with it that I was telling the world about it. And I kept telling people, you need to buy it from this company. And so people were buying from that company. And that company was like, wow, where's all this business coming from? Mark, you're referring everyone to us. Thank you so much for this stuff. But then after a couple of years, they said, we're not going to do this anymore. We've decided to move on to other things. And basically within a few months, I started selling those RODI systems myself. And so I had a spot on my website where you could buy RODI systems and filters. And so my website was articles, critter ID, photography tips, and RODI systems. And I started playing with acrylic, and I started to make some things out of acrylic. People said, wow, can you make one for me? Which started me into building sumps for people. And so my little business was happening, but I was going to work every night, stripping and waxing floors in convenience stores and hair salons and pizza places like Domino's. I did all the lens crafters in the area. I did all the kinder cares for the daycare for children. Anything that was closed at night that they'd hire me to do, I was stripping and waxing floors. And while I was at work running a buffer, I was thinking about my next article. And it was all about the education. And I did this for a long, long time. And then my website would get updated with a few new things, like different sumps I built. But that was it. So you had sumps and RO units, and I didn't sell anything else. And I think it was in around 2010. No, it was before that. Maybe 2009. My best friend was telling me at the time, you should be selling more products that you can just put in a box and ship, rather than having to build every single thing you sell. And I said, yeah, I love that idea. But who's going to let me? And when I'd go to different vendors and say, or distributors and say, I want to sell these products, they'd either say, yes, you can, or no, you can't. And a lot of times you get the no, you can't because you're not running a fish store. You're not a brick and mortar store someone can walk into and buy a light, buy a heater, buy a test kit, buy a fish net, or buy livestock. And I did not want to run a fish store. I absolutely have no desire to run a fish store in my life, ever. I just have very strong feelings on that. But I'm fine with dry goods. And so what happened over the last 10 years, my website has become more and more about the business on the front end, but all the knowledge is still there. And when I look at my Google Analytics for the month, it shows how many people came to the website and all the articles they're reading every single month. And a lot of return visitors are looking up another article. They're looking up another DIY thing. They're looking up another solution to a problem, like how to keep your skimmer from overflowing. And that's been an ongoing thing, but it's because of 2 or 3 really close friends telling me, you have to promote your business so you can make money. And they're not wrong, because I had chosen in 2009, I said, this will be the last time I clean a floor. So I said, I'll either starve to death and never have to work again because I'll be dead, or I'll make money. And so here we are. This is my 11th year of just making money from Miller's Reef. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is because there's something else I wanted to add in there. I kept coming across comments from people. They would say, well, why does Mark get to do this? Why does Miller's Reef get to sell these things? Or, what about Mark? It kept coming up all the time. And they would always say, it's different because it's Mark. And I'm just like, I don't understand. So I remember talking to someone who's really well respected in the industry. And we were talking about guys that run businesses out of their garages. And I said, well, I'm one of them. He goes, no, it's okay because it's you. And I said, okay, thank you. But what does that mean? Because I just don't understand it. I feel like I'm one of those guys. I'm literally running a business out of my home. And he said, you put in the hard work first. You have been focused on education this whole time. So for you to go from that into the business is what allows you to come into the business. Where you didn't just show up and say, I want to sell these products and I want to become this big booming, the next BRS, for example. And I was like, oh, really? And they're like, yeah, that's exactly why. I was like, oh, okay. At least I understand what they meant. Because it confused me, because I felt like, well, yeah, I've got a garage. I have power tools in there. I'm building things in there. But I'm not just trying to flip stuff. I'm actually really, I'm very against flipping, buying used setups and then charging more. And it's a whole other rant of mine.
Throw out more acrylic because you're so pissed off about the bubble.
Yeah, no, I'm very picky about what I do. And when things are wrong, I actually dispose of it and build it again because I want the customer to be happy and I want it to last and be a good quality product. And I really care about my products. I really care about my reputation, and I care about the customers. I try really hard to make everyone happy. It's super hard. When you think about it being self-employed, which is what I technically am, every single customer is your boss. And I had over 1,300 bosses last year. So it's been, a hard run, and out of 1,300, I probably have 20 people not super happy with me, but I'm doing the best I can as an individual, and I'm looking to expand and do better this year, and keep going. But my point is, when you're trying to enter this hobby, you're like, ooh, I see a market, I can make money. You're going to see a lot of walls go up really quickly. Where if you are in the hobby for the love of the hobby, for the love of the animals, and you're embracing a business, it helps. It's going to be tricky, and you're going to have to accept the word no. And I've had companies that say, hey, like for example, I remember one brand said, hey, we'd like you to sell our products. Like, that's great. And then I paid for the items, and they hadn't even shipped yet. And the next day, that owner called me up and said, hey, we've got a problem. And I was like, okay, what? He says, I can't sell to you. That got me in big trouble with such and such. And I was thinking, well, how would such and such even know? Because I wrote you a check. I didn't talk to anyone. So clearly he or one of his people said something to someone else. And this is a very small industry, and everyone knows everyone. So you got to be on the up and up. You got to be honest. And basically, I told him, that's fine. If I can't sell your product, I can't sell it. And he says, well, you can get it from this distributor. And I was like, okay. So I contacted them and said yes. And I ordered what I needed from them, and everyone's happy. But you just have to be really careful that you don't just go in guns blazing and expect the world to bend to your will. That's not how this industry works. Like I said, too many people know each other, and they talk, and they're very aware, and they are always looking to shut down guys that are up to no good. So be honest, be forthright, understand your limits. If you want to get into this industry and you want to sell things, I understand that desire. I get it. I know some people want their tank to pay for itself, which I think is kind of optimistic. I think that's, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's what people do more and more these days because they don't like the expense of a hobby. But the definition of a hobby is to basically buy and invest into this thing and spend time on it and enjoy it. And somehow people are constantly, some people are constantly trying to find a way to make it pay for itself, which is kind of unrealistic. I just feel like you should just enjoy it for what it is. Just like you get a dog and you feed it and you pet it and you teach it tricks and you hug it and it jumps up on the bed with you at night, that's fine. Others want to buy a dog so they can make puppies, so they can sell the puppies, so they can take care of the cost of the dog food or the dog toys or the vet bills or whatever. I'm not that kind of person. I want to just enjoy the pet. When I got Spock, my plan was to just take good care of that fish until it dies. And that's still what my plan is. Nothing more, nothing less. So anyway, that's the end of story time. Let's go to the next question. Paul says, what is your go-to additive for SPS? It's just the big three. Alkaline, calcium, and magnesium are the three additives that SPS corals need. Very stable water, stable temperature, stable salinity, those big three being taken care of. If you take care of all that and keep them in their little square on the graph, corals will just grow and grow and grow. Michael says, any new information on your top secret project? Nope, nothing to tell you about. Sorry.
Wait, there's a top secret.
Emmanuel says, can you extract your info to Reef Trace from the Neptune Apex? No, we've even asked if that was possible, and they said no. So if you have stuff in there, you can't. But you could definitely enter it into both, and then you have a backup no matter what.
It's a loop around for your tank loop.
I'm looking at that next question. Kanye says, is running carbon necessary in a reef tank? It's not necessary, but it helps clarify the water and make it more crystal clear for the full run. Like when I run carbon on my tank, and this tank that you're looking at, it's 84 inches long, 7 feet. And when the water's crystal clear, it's because I ran carbon. And when it gets a little bit murky, it's because my carbon is used up. So I recommend a half a cup of carbon per 50 gallons. And it's good for about 3 days. And I recommend it be in a reactor, not just in a mesh bag lying in the bottom of the sump. You want water to flow through the carbon, do its job for a few days, remove it from the system. And do that once a month. That blue reactor that's in the fish room. Caitlin asked me questions. She's learning too. She's a fish person. I'm the gear guy. Gary Cole says, what's a good fish to maintain algae that can be in a 25-gallon tank for a long time? The lawnmower blenny is a good one.
Colonies.
And then you might be able to get some freshwater mollies that have been converted to saltwater. I've heard they help to eat algae. And then the other thing, if algae is really getting bad in the tank, you can use Flux RX, which is fluconazole. I like that product because it's a plastic vial with a little spoon, and you scoop out the right amount and put it in the tank, and you just let it melt the stuff away. And my frag tank was filled with this nuisance algae, and I put in the right amount of fluconazole, I think twice, and it went away. It was great. I didn't have to do anything but clean the skimmer.
Algae blennies are way more interesting.
Oh yeah, no, the algae blenny is a really fun, entertaining fish that basically looks like it's smiling at you, or sometimes it looks grumpy, and they perch everywhere. Yeah, and it just depends. I've seen mine smile.
Have you?
Yeah, it would smile. But they can be a little bit aggressive toward other fish. Like, for example, Spock, this giant tang, Nassau tang, the algae blend would swim up from the rock, and this whale goes by, just this wall of gray, and then the algae blend would just bite on the side and like take a bite, like sucking algae off the glass. And of course, Spock was not happy about that, turned on a dime and went after that fish like, you will die for that. I am not a billboard.
Those were vampire blennies.
No, that was the Lenore Blaine did that. I watched it happen. Crazy. Let's see. Alberto says, in my 29-gallon, could I add 2 pajamas and a firefish? Absolutely.
Yep. Be nice, actually. Well, pajamas like to be in 3 or more.
What?
Cardinals, they're shoaling fish, so they like to be in like groups of 3 or more.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a small tank, though. I guess if you could get some really small ones, really small pajamas, I would get 3. But if they're larger, then 2. But they do like to be in groups. So it'd be better if you can get 3. But it's a small tank, so don't recommend that. Regis says, the soda ash, so I mix it with RODI or tank water. You mix it with RODI water. And that's how you're making your solution. Just like, you think about everything you buy in the store, whether it's hair products, everything has water in it. And they're going to use the most pure water they can to avoid contaminants. So anytime you're mixing any kind of solution, whether it's alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, you're using RODI water with that. The reason you're doing that is it's costing you less money to buy the ingredient and mix it with water than to pay for someone else to mix it for you. Just like your salt mix. You mix that with RODI water, right? You could buy jugs and jugs of salt water, but it'd be really heavy. And if you had to ship it in, it'd be very expensive to be delivered, right? So we buy just the salt and we mix it with our own water and make salt water. It's the same. You make your own soda ash, which is alkalinity. You make your own calcium chloride. You make your own magnesium chloride. And you're mixing them up yourself to save money. But if you don't want to mix your own, there's brands on the market that are pre-mixed in quart bottles. And if your tank is small, like a 25-gallon or a 29-gallon or something like that, even a 55, you can use ESV's B-Ionic. B-Ionic's been around for a very long time. And I really, really like it because it's a part A, part B bottle. So they are the alkaline calcium. But they have 80 other elements included in it, whatever they are. And so I just use those 2, A and B, or 1 and 2, or whatever they were called, and I put that only in my tank, and my tank thrived with nothing else added. I didn't even do the magnesium thing back then. I never used, are you talking about for additives?
No, it's salt water.
Carib Sea doesn't make a salt mix. You can only buy their jugs of water. What? Everyone's asking why you're talking over there and not just coming on here and just... I'll tell you why.
I'm busy.
Because she's shy. Sorry, guys. I should just put a microphone over there just so they can hear you talk. Huang says, Happy New Year, best of 2021. Love watching your channel. It's educational. Last week's stream was fun. I just got up with all your streams. Oh, you've been completely caught up. That's great. I've been busy. I bet you have watching all these. There was a lot of streams on this channel. Havo says, hi from Belfast. Thank you very much. He said, love your channel. Ah, Jacob Smith says, my wife says hi to Caitlin.
Ah, hi!
Hopefully you could hear that. Let's see. Rob says, can we watch Spock eat a banana? If I had one, but I don't.
Don't we?
I ate them. Next time. Trent says, Happy New Year. My snails seem to be sexing it up like once a month for the last 4 months. Everything in the tank is stable and lighting stays the same. Animals spawning in your tank is usually a good sign. Usually. So if you see it every month, just think of it as additional reef food that is just dumped in the system because the corals are going to eat it. The filtration is going to catch the excess. It should be fine. Now, if you ever have like a crazy spawning event where the tank is just completely cloudy, it might be good to add an air stone for oxygen levels and make sure your protein skimmer is ready to pull out whatever it can. But other than that, I usually just think of it as extra food and I don't worry about it.
But spawning is like the great reason for the lunar cycle thing on the lights.
Yeah, when earlier we were mentioning about lighting schedules and using the lunar cycle, sometimes you can use the lunar cycle as part of your lighting programming, which can encourage spawning events. Certain corals will spawn under it. Even shrimp could be releasing their eggs all around. They kind of learn the lunar cycle too.
Those like bioluminescent like things.
I'm gonna put you on camera. She's really talking a lot today. It's funny. Jason says you mentioned your thing about adding a clam. Are you worried about your copper band eating it? Well, I wasn't until now. I don't know. Wow. Reef Keeper says the black spiny brittle star can live a long time. I've had mine for over 25 years. He's massive.
I was stung by one. Wait, is that the one with like the spiny tip?
Yeah, it's got the spikes all over its body. CT says, I recently bought a few corals. The company was late on delivery, so they arrived in really bad shape.
Oh, no.
I added them to my reef, and a few hours later, my 2 clownfish died.
Oh, no!
Yes, that happens. When you have something that looks really bad, you know, the bag looks smoky or cloudy, you take it on, you smell it and it smells bad, don't put that in your tank. You could put in a quarantine tank and hope for the best, but it arrived late. It's been rotting in a bag. Then you took that rotting object and put it in your tank, and yes, you can affect your livestock, and it can kill things, including fish. So I'm very sorry that happened to you. It's a hard lesson to learn, but just never take a chance with your reef. If anything is questionable, I mean, I see people do it all the time. They'll say, "Ooh, I saw this. I think it might be a pest, and I flushed it." And we're like, no, it was a good guy. Well, too late, it's gone. Well, a coral or an anemone or anything that stinks, or a snail and smells gross, or it's slimy, or you have a piece of rock that someone gave you and you smell it and it smells like sulfur, don't put it in your tank. It's too risky.
It's like sushi. If it smells like fish, don't eat it.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Justin says, how did you plumb your 2 tanks together? I want to do the similar one on my 220, my 100-gallon frag tank. If you go to my website and go to My Tanks, just start clicking. The 400-gallon and the 60-gallon anemone cube are 2 separate subsettings of the My Tanks area, and they all show the plumbing from either going into the sump, and you can kind of see how it all works. But there's 2 return pumps, not just 1. How are we doing on time? Okay. Best advice for keeping a Nassau tank happy is to have a large aquarium where they have plenty of swimming space, plenty of food, possibly a banana. And don't touch it. Leave it alone. Just let the fish be. We don't want to rub off their slime coat. We want them to be safe and healthy.
They're so velvety.
Okay, Tyler is giving us the list of 16 fish.
Yes!
So,
thank God.
Here we go. Listen. 2 clowns, Melanoris wrasse, a dragonette, 2 yashigobis, a morsidal, the swallowtail angel pair,
Right.
Sunburst Antheus,
I want to meet him.
Magnificent Foxface,
What?
Midas Blenny, Orchid Toddyback, Yellow Tang, Purple Tang, Whitetail Tang. So that seems like a pretty good load. I wouldn't put any more fish in if it was me.
Oh, it sounds so nice.
Yeah, it does. You should post pictures of that in Club Mueller's Reef. You probably already have, but do it again. And tag me and tag Caitlin. Hey, Jason Langer.
No.
Eyelash blennies are Exinius SPP, perfect for small tanks. If you like an ugly brown fish.
You're not ugly.
Okay.
You're just brown.
Stefan says, doesn't Vortec highly not recommend using vinegar? No, you can definitely use vinegar. You can use vinegar, you can use hot water, you can use muriatic acid, you can use citric acid, you can use whatever you want. Some people are worried about the O-rings being damaged. Just remove the O-ring and then soak the rest of it. I used vinegar for years, and I've been running Vortex since they came out in, I think, 2007, 2006. And trust me, many of those went through a lot of vinegar with no problems whatsoever. Mueller's Reef, do you know any bright green fish for a 309-gallon tank? Bright green, I can think of the green leaf wrasse, but I don't know how friendly that is or reef safe it is.
Got like 50 clown gobies.
You could get small green clown gobies.
Wait. No, I remember the rats.
Okay.
No, not the Lunari. Maybe. Right? Maybe. Perhaps.
You might look in the wrasse collection and see if there's anything green in there. Caitlin can't remember what she was thinking of. Once you're on camera, they're going to look at you. Rob says, what style overflow are you using on your tank? It's an external overflow box, and I'm running a double Herbie drain system.
Double. I'm pretty sure it's a Lunari wrasse.
Chromuses can come in green. That's someone mentioned. So you can get some green chromus. A lot of times they look light blue to me.
Not for that kind of size tank.
Well, if you got like 50 of them. They can't hear you. Or maybe they can. Yeah, that might be a lunar wrasse.
That's what I said.
Maybe a lunar wrasse is in the green family.
You don't even listen.
Hey, Len, I'm on a live stream. If you're going to talk this much, you're going to come on camera with your own microphone.
Look, it's so green. Look.
All right. I answered that one already. Luke says, I bought a conch a week ago and it immediately buried in the sand and I haven't seen it since. Should I be concerned? They can go down in the sand for up to 3 weeks. And I believe what they're doing down there while they're submerged is they're growing the shell larger, and then they will come back out again and start working their way through the sand bed. So that's something normal that they do from time to time. Sky says, if my water conditions are stable and my tank was set up in the last few months, can I get an anemone yet? I've kept them in the past and they did well. It comes down to the size of the tank and the stability of the water. Could you possibly do it, especially with your previous experience? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know enough information about your new tank. I don't know what you used compared to with your previous tanks. Did you use dry rock or did you use live rock? You know, I mean, there's some things that could be different now that could be a problem. I usually like to recommend people wait 9 months before they put an anemone in their tank, because those are animals that can live 100 years. And then you asked, do you quarantine anemones? No, normally we don't. There's different types of anemones out there, like the tube anemone, the rock anemone, the flower anemone, the bubble tips, the sea bays, and then the riteri and the more expensive ones, the red carpets. You know, there's so many kinds out there. But normally we would just, I like to acclimate first, and then if I've seen people do this. I'm not quite to that point, but I've seen people take the anemone after it's acclimated, and they will set it on a plate, like a big dinner plate, so it can kind of deflate and release a lot of water, and then they take the thinner anemone and put it in the tank to eliminate extra water that came from the bag getting into their own tank to avoid any kind of infection from getting into the system. But usually if I got a new anemone, I acclimated and I just reached in the bag, pulled it out and put it in my tank. And then I didn't touch it again. Rick says, I recently read a thread about par for bubble tip anemones ranging from the lows of 140 all the way to the highs of 450 par. What par do you recommend for bubble tip anemones, and what's the par on your anemone cube? Well, the anemone cube has more par at the top than it does way down here at the bottom, of course. And I believe here in the middle, it's around 300 and something. Down here at the sand, it measures, depending which corner, one corner is like 160. And then, stuff way at the surface is going to be even higher. And the anemones are going to move too. So even if you have the perfect par in one spot, it may pick a really dark corner and thrive there for a long time. They're not as light demanding as certain other animals, like the Ritterite demands a ton of par. So you can get it. I know one guy that kept rose bubble tips under the little refugium bulb I used to recommend. That was a par 38 bulb. That was just a compact fluorescent. And he had a tank full of those things under that thing, and they were all doing really well. Lefty says, my wife thinks I'm crazy to get into this hobby now that I'm retired. Well, how much money did you save up? But I'm looking to do my first reef aquarium this year. I'm in Granbury visiting. Can you recommend any local fish stores to visit? I don't know if there's any stores in Granbury right now. There may be one. But here in Fort Worth, there's Fish Paradise, there's Frank's Tanks. Those are here. They're about 45 minutes from Granbury. You could go to them. You can work your way more toward the east, and you can hit stores in Arlington and in Dallas and in Plano and in North Richland Hills. I mean, there's a bunch of different. We have about 20 stores here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Let's see. Sean says, I love your shirt. I wonder why. He was involved in ReefWorks. Let's see. Linda says, would I need a chiller to run halides? Well, I run halides and I don't have a chiller, but I keep my house a comfortable 70, 71 degrees all year long. And I have a vent that pulls the warm air out of the room so that the heat from the lights does not affect my tank. I mean, the fact that the lights are on all day long does add about 2 degrees to the tank. And then when they're off, the tank temperature starts to drop off, and then the heaters come on to maintain it. And but I have not run a chiller in any of my tanks the entire time I've been in this hobby.
Dehydrate the hell out.
Gary says, do you find using products like Waste Away or Vibrant causing dinos since it reduces phosphate and nitrate too much? Well, I'm hearing things like that, but I haven't come across that myself because I haven't used either of those products. The absolute lack of nitrate and phosphate does throw an imbalance in the water system, in the parameter of your tank, and that lack will be filled by something. There's always going to be something waiting for an opportunity, and so we want to make sure that we don't allow dinoflagellates to take over. My little frag tank that I complain about all the time that's just looking so poorly, it kind of has feelings of dinos kicking in right now. So I've been putting in Live Rock Enhance every couple of days for the last few days because I know that will get rid of it, and because it's a competing bacteria. But yes, it is possible that you can overdose anything in your tank and cause something ugly to happen, such as dinoflagellates. Roshan says, I've seen some filter floss media in lids to remove nitrate and phosphate. Are they effective? I don't know. Huang says, I'm watching your channel. I have so much red Coraline algae and I'm trying to scrape it off the glass. How can I manage them to stop growing? I also have the green hard algae as well. Coraline algae is a good thing, but yes, if your tank is perfect, you're going to grow a ton of it. And the best way is to stay on top of it and keep scraping it off before it gets hard. If you were to clean your glass every single day, it can never take hold. But most of us don't quite do it daily, and some of us even wait a week.
With, like, a razor.
So you're going to have to get in there with a razor of some kind or a scraper, and you're going to be very careful. I also like to use a credit card or a hotel room key card or a gift card to scrape because that is softer than the glass and it won't scratch your glass at all, and you can chip it away. But your parameters are perfect to grow Coraline, which means it's perfect for a reef. So I can't really tell you to change anything. And like I've told people, I said, if you're complaining about Coraline growing too much, it's really a matter of you're just doing such a good job. that you've hit that spot. And I've had people say, I wish I could grow it. And I'm telling you, well, not really, because once it happens, it's so hard to control. So you have to stay on top of it. Variant says, is using the low micron sock mandatory when using Phosphate RX? The benefit of the 5 micron sock is that it catches the flocculant quickly, just like using Phosban L from Two Little Fishies. That's another version of that. And then Brightwell has Phosphate E, I believe. These are all flocculants that turn the phosphate into a solid that can be trapped in a fine micron sock. And I think a lot of people don't know what micron their sock is. They go, oh, I have socks, but they have typically 100 or 200 micron, which is way bigger than a 5 micron sock. Blue Life USA came out with a 10 micron sock about 2 years ago, but I've been using Phosphate RX for 8 years already without it. I just let my protein skimmer do the job. So using the sock sped up the process of keeping the water clear more rapidly. You put it in the tank, it goes down the drain, it gets caught in the sock immediately, and it's removing the phosphate instantaneously versus letting it circulate through the system all night long and the skimmer gradually pull it out. So it's better to do it with a sock, but if you don't have it, you can do it without. And a lot of times people tell me, well, I want to use this product in my very small tank. And in those tanks, they usually don't have a good skimmer. So it's really tricky. And so I would prefer that they'd rig up something temporarily overnight to where they have, a power head in the tank like a MaxiJet, pushes the water out of the tank into a bucket that has that filter sock in it, drains out of the bucket back into the tank. So it's like a little closed loop for the night. So you can put in the Phosphate RX and it pumps right out, goes through the sock and goes back in, and it's removing or clarifying the water rapidly. And then the next day you just take the whole thing off because you're done. So that would be smarter and safer. And also, you do not have to use the maximum recommended dose of Phosphate RX that's in the package. You can use less and do it a couple of times versus doing all of it at one time. And I did that with my tank recently where my phosphates were 0.75 and I put like 150 drops, and then the next day I put another 150 drops, and then I checked the day after that my phosphates are down where they belong to 0.05. And then someone asked me today in a private message, is there really a limit to how quickly you can bring phosphate down? And like I said earlier in the stream, I'm just not scared of phosphate, and I will bring it down rapidly, and my livestock doesn't seem to care. Now, some people, they want to be more gradual. They want to bring it out a little bit, and bring it a little bit, and bring it a little bit, and keep it low. But phosphate is a pollutant, just like a room full of smoke, and you're trying to breathe. So the quicker you get it out of there, the better. You're also going to rob the nutrient from algae, so the algae doesn't grow. So I've done it this way forever. Maybe I'm just lucky that way. I don't know, but like 10 years of using this stuff, I haven't had any weird things happen from doing it this method. And sometimes I had to bring it down from a really high number because the auto feeder dropped in so much food in the tank that it dropped an entire month's worth of flake food into the tank all at once, like over one weekend. And it was confetti everywhere, and you can't catch it fast enough. And then phosphates were 3.0. And so I'd use Phosphate RX, I'd wait 2 days, Phosphate RX, wait 2 days, Phosphate RX. I did it for like 2 weeks, and I got it all the way down to where it belonged again. So I don't have a fear of it, but at the same time, I understand caution, so I would tell you, go more slowly than I do and just take your time. And just use less of it and bring it down gradually. Jason says, can you use a reactor with a sediment filter to filter freshly mixed salt water into a bin to take out the brown gunk, like impurities from the salt mix? I would just pump it straight into a 5 micron filter sock and just put the sock in your tank or attach it to the end of the hose and just pump it in the tank and let the sock catch anything. It'd be a lot easier, and you're not going to deal with a reactor and the small holes that are on each side of the reactor, or the possibility of the micron filter, the sediment filter clogging up prematurely because it's covered in snot. So I've done that. I've had a big vat, and I didn't want whatever I saw in the vat that irritated me to get in the tank. I just put a big sock on the end and pumped right through that, even if I had to hold it until the tank was full, and then I removed the sock and washed it, and I was done. McGrath says, how do you kill Digitate Hydroids? I've got a lot of them in my current tank and don't want them when I move corals to the new tank. Well, the nice thing about Digitate Hydroids is you usually see where they're coming from. So all you got to do is take note of that spot where you see one, and then reach in with a tube of super glue gel and close their hole, and then do the next hole and do the next hole. And you just basically seal them in their little holes, and you'll control them. They'll be gone.
So mean.
We got a super chat from a troll. I'm giving him credit. IB Rippenham says, my butt makes noises, and he gave us $2.
Huh.
Thank you. Appreciate that super chat.
My butt makes noises.
That's awesome. Who else wants to say something stupid and give me money? That's great. All right, let's see. Rashawn says, Caulerpa or Chetomorpha in the refugium? Which one is better for controlling nitrates and easier to maintain? Caulerpa grows really fast and has been the one plant that has worked for me for decades. I've not had a lot of luck with Chetomorpha, but Chetomorpha is being used in nitrate reactors where you fill it up and there's a light down the middle, like the, what is that thing called? The arid reactor. It's a big, tall reactor, and it's very expensive, and it grows Chetomorpha like crazy. And so that was one method that some people are embracing. It really comes down to what fits your scenario, what fits your budget. But either one will help in removing stuff from the tank. But eventually, you have so much stuff in your tank that even the plants can't keep up, like my tank. That's why my nitrates are so high. I mean, my tank is over 7 years old. I'm looking for the next question. Smoking Reefers asked, do you know how to attach a CO2 scrubber to a Deltec skimmer? I do not, but I bet there's a post somewhere on the web that will show you exactly how to do that. Oh, neat. Dylan's Little Hobbies, great. It says, I'm a new subscriber. I enjoyed some of your videos. I just got my first saltwater tank. My hopes are seahorses, but I plan to give myself a year and learn about my tank and my system before I attempt it. That is awesome. That's really good. There are some really smart seahorse keepers out there. One is on Facebook. Her name is Felicia Macaulay, and she's also on Instagram. She was one of the people I called at Live Aquaria back in the day when I had a seahorse with tail rot, and she gave me advice over the phone, and I believe even sent me medication to help my little seahorse named Casper to get better. So she's super smart, and there's quite a few really good websites about seahorse care that you can learn, like you said, over the next year to make sure that your tank is set up properly. There are certain rules when it comes to seahorses that we cannot do with reef tanks. So you're gonna,
I'd be happier like setting up an octopus tank.
You're gonna want the temperature of the tank to be the right temperature. You're gonna make sure the tank is the right height for that seahorse. You have to make sure that there's certain things in there, like the heater is protected so the seahorse can't touch it. You got to watch out there's no aptasia in there. Make sure there's nothing in there that competes with them for food. But there's things you can put in there that's really cool. One thing that you might end up doing is making this really pretty garden of algae that the seahorses live in. And instead of plastic plants, you could actually have literal dragon algae, the red stuff. You could have Caulerpa in there. You could have Chetomorpha. You could have all these different, the bottle brush algae. There's all these cool algae that come from the ocean.
The green one.
So you can get really crazy. Alex says, can corals live 100 years? Absolutely. Some corals in the ocean are considered to be 1,000 years old. Some grow very slowly. And that's the thing about science. We'll watch some nature show or we'll hear some group complain about this hobby is taken from the ocean and this coral took 1,000 years to grow this size. Well, they're pointing at one of the slowest growing corals on the planet, where we could put an Acropora in a tank and grow it an inch in a month. So it depends on the species. But like the big brain corals, the big maze corals, they're just a big mass, and they grow, the outer rim grows like 1 millimeter a year. It's super slow, where something else, like I said, a bird's nest would grow extremely rapidly. Mike says, I have a cleaner shrimp and I just picked up a tiny Watchman goby. Can I add a pistol shrimp for the goby to hang out, or will a different shrimp kill each other? No, they'll be fine. You can have both. No, Andrea says she can hear Caitlin really well. So all those little noises you're making in the background, people are hearing it all. Our seller says, can you give me any tips on wire management when upgrading to the new tank? You know, there's so much information about that. You'll see examples on websites like BRS or Marine Depot. There's these, if you're part of the Neptune group on Facebook, you'll see how people have these plastic tracks that they hug the wires into, or they hide the wires in to suspend them horizontally. And then there's a lot of options out there. You can really tie things down. And the only problem is when you have to remove something, you have to undo everything to get that one wire out. That's kind of the downside. Thomas says, I am my ATO system. Can I add reef salts to a gallon of distilled water to keep for 2 days at the most, or will the water sour and be unusable? I don't know why you'd add anything to your water, even if it's distilled water. We top off with fresh water, not with salt water. So you would just have gallons of RODI water, or in this case distilled water, and you put that in the tank to replace what evaporated because the salt stays in your system. Ugly Reefer from Germany wants you on camera. We went out to breakfast today and she looked amazing. Then she came home and she says, I'm done with today. Alex says, and thank you for the super chat. Besides adding more food and fish, what are your thoughts for increasing nitrate for mature tanks that experience the lack of nitrate and phosphate? You can actually dose nitrate and phosphate. I sell both those products on my website. I have Neofos and Neonitrate. And those you can put in a little bit each day, but you have to test really, really carefully on a daily basis because you want it to increase from 0 to something, but not skyrocket. Because if you have a tank that has 0 nitrate and you're dosing, and now it's 1, now it's 2, now it's 3, now it's 50, your corals are going to start dying because it was this massive jump. So you have to be super careful that if you get to like 3 nitrate, then you dose less or stop temporarily and kind of see where it goes because you want to maintain that low level. You definitely don't want to spike it, just like you don't want to collapse it. So that's a situation that can help. Rob Pinkman gave us $5 so we could buy Spock more bananas. Thank you for the super chat. Let me do something here. Trying to fix something here, guys. Hang on. There we go. It's a little bit better. So she's behind the camera now, in case you guys are curious. You're so distracting, woman. We better wrap up this live stream. Thomas says, you might as well join the program.
Hi, Thomas.
She says hi. Marcus says, I tried feeding my tanks banana, but they wouldn't touch it, but damsels would pick at it. You can take the piece of banana and put it in the tank between your fingertips and just squeeze and mash it till little pieces fly off. And it may not work the first time. It may not work the second time. You do it a few times, you know, like once every couple of weeks. You may start to see some interest because all my fish go chase it now at this point. They all want to bite. It's pretty interesting. I'm seeing, all these comments are always 20 minutes from when I'm talking. They're all like, we hear her. We hear her loud and clear. You don't even need a microphone. Jeez. Rob says, do I run UV? No, I don't run UV and I don't run ozone.
I know.
Skynas says, thanks so much. I'll wait on, thank you for the super chat. He says, do you like all for Reef? My friend who's had his tank for over 20 years, the Randy Holmes Farley method of alkaline magnesium. I haven't used all for Reef. I don't have any opinion on it, so I can't tell you good or bad. Oh, by the way, Drunken Reefer says, I found a plastic razor blades on Amazon that work great for any razor blade holder. Works great on hard glass for, to remove algae. And then someone else posted, which I sell, and I didn't mention it, there's a flipper scraper that's their platinum scraper, and you can put any kind of plastic credit card in it and use that to scrape and just toss the card and put a new one on. And I have those in stock as well. Yes. Tahoe Underground says, I'd love to share the PDF of the aquarium maintenance log sheet I created for everyone in the community if you'd like. Yeah, if there's a way to share it, do it. That'd be great. You can go to Club Meals Reef. I will put that on the screen. Odds are you're already a member in there, and if you're not, just join, and I'll get you approved. Dustin says, when will it be time to replace your tank due to the tank's age? Man, I hope for never. I don't want to replace it. It's too much work. When I dreamed up this tank behind me, I said, this is it. This is my dream tank, and I'm going to have it for 10 years. And I just realized that was 2010. So we're at 10 years, even though technically it's only 7 years old, because it was the replacement tank for the first one that leaked. But I'd like to go much longer if possible. I'm trying to be very careful not to do anything that could affect its seams. Tracy says, Caitlin, how old do clownfish have to be before they will breed? My black ocellaris, they're cleaning off the area and doing the little dance, but I haven't had them for a year yet.
Like months. You do like the breeding thing?
Yeah.
Months, yeah.
But how old would they have to be to start?
Breeding? Like 5 to 12 months?
She's saying months. I know certain clownfish out there could take years before they start. Like the maroon clownfish, they have to be 3 to 5 years before they're sexually mature enough to start breeding and laying eggs.
She said.
So, they probably heard that. The spiritual counselor says, I just replenished my safety stop, which I ordered from your website. Thanks for the information on it, and I have not lost a fish since using it. That's great. Glad to hear it. For those of you that don't know, buying things from Miller's Reef helps support this channel and keeps Spock fed, and it even gets us fed as well, so we want to keep doing that. So if you can buy anything from Miller's Reef, I appreciate it. If it's something easy, it goes in a box. It usually goes out very rapidly. If it's something I have to build, there could be a wait. Currently, I have about 30 customers waiting for acrylic items, and that seems to be a constant. I can't seem to catch up and get down to nothing, which would be really neat to happen one day, and I'd like to get there. I don't know if it's ever going to happen because there's always new orders, but I do appreciate the support you guys do in trusting me with not only giving you education and hopefully providing answers that work for you, but also for trusting me to give you products for your aquarium. Alex, thank you very much for the super chat. He says, I have a rose bubble tip in my second tank. That is a 3.7 gallon tank. I'm very vigilant with all parameters. Happy New Year's. I bet you are. Boy, that is a tiny tank for that anemone. Those roses get pretty big. Yeah, you need to put a picture of that on Club Meals Reef for us.
What?
I want to see this tank.
But does he have a clownfish?
Spiritual counselor says, why not put a gel filter on your live camera so that the tank doesn't look so blue and on fire? Because then I will be blue. or I'll be yellow. We've done stuff like this before, and sometimes what I would do instead is I'd run a video in the background and just superimpose me. I just didn't do anything today because I had people walk out the door literally 2 minutes before I hit start, so I didn't have a chance. Guys, it is water test Saturday. Please test your water, and that means alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, nitrate, phosphate, salinity, temperature, pH. You want to know all of these and make sure that your numbers are good, and if they're not, figure out what's wrong and correct it. You may need to calibrate things like your pH probe, You may need to calibrate your refractometer for salinity to make sure it's accurate. I sell a product called Accuracy by Two Little Fishies that is literally 35 ppt solution, which is designed to calibrate a refractometer, and that would be best for you. You want to make sure that all your dosing tubes are not leaking air and actually dosing the product, that what you're dosing into your system is mixing properly and not just congealing on the side of your sun. You want to make sure that you take the tubing and roll it between your fingertips to break off any crusties so the fluid comes out when it's supposed to dose, so your tank isn't being limited on something it's supposed to receive. And after that, you can then get on Club Neela's Reef with us and talk with us for the next few days about whatever's going on with your tank, or share pictures or video. I have seen some beautiful shares recently in the club, some videos of tanks like, man, that tank looks fantastic. And I follow quite a few of you on Instagram as well, which I really enjoy seeing what you guys share. So it's great that we have social media so we can connect with our tanks these days online, since we are not able to get together in person and we have to do things like we are doing today. I will do what I can to convince Caitlin to come on camera so that it doesn't feel like there's just someone off camera, like a kid running into the room when the news reporter's telling the news. I hope you guys have a great weekend. We are guaranteed 100% we're going to have snow tomorrow. I cannot wait to go see it because it'll be gone the next day. But I hope that you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you in a week. Bye. Say bye, Caitlin.
Bye.